There you go. We're about to just move these off, man. Today has been a morning. Oh, Lord. Ah. It's my pulleys. 24 off. So we are back, man, after a week off. We had 183 units on the truck today. 183. And it was extremely chaotic this morning. We haven't been able to run for about a week because the weather got crazy. We had the snow apocalypse, and here in Alabama, man, we're really not equipped to handle when it starts to get this way. So everything just shuts down. And there was possibly a day or two last week that I could have ran, but it wasn't worth me risking it at all. Like I didn't feel comfortable to even try to do it. So I was like, I'm just gonna go ahead and sit this one out. And that's one of the things that you gotta be mindful of. If you're jumping into the logistics world, you gotta account for the weather. And you might have some down moments where you can't go out there and earn anything because, the weather, Mother Nature. However, it's okay. It was definitely cool to get a chance to have a week. Oh, Lord, dang, van and Prevost then jumped in front of me like this. The last 2 weeks have been pretty interesting. And one of the things that I've started to understand as I've been on this entrepreneurial journey is that you have to really learn to remain neutral almost in your reactions to things. And what I mean is remain indifferent. Celebrate the stuff, celebrate the wins, acknowledge when it's not so ideal, but don't get too overly happy or overly excited about when things are going good, because you realize that there is a flow to this universe, right? And what goes up must come down is law, right? So I started really understanding that I just needed to choose what I wanted to experience and be very detailed about what I want to experience, but also be okay with when things don't seem to go so ideally, right? I'm cool either way. So the last couple of weeks has been an emotional roller coaster because of getting my truck out the shop. And after getting the truck out the shop, the first day of using the truck, it breaks down again. So the woes of being an owner-operator is real. And you gotta be prepared for that mentally. And it was at the same time, as my truck is breaking down, I'm seeing an approval letter for funding through one of my LLCs. So in a split second, it was I'm reading the email, hey, you're approved. I'm, obviously excited that my LLC is starting to get to the point where we're receiving funding. And then in the same moment of reading the email, my truck breaks down. So this is an example of why you really have to try to remain indifferent. And that doesn't mean that I'm not hyped when I get good news. It just means that I'm not finna get too sad when I don't hear not so good news, right? So you learn to really control your emotions in regards to that, and it helps you kind of stay centered with aligning with the stuff that you do want to experience. So again, even in this week, in that same week, I was also informed that one of my contracts or my morning route, I was no longer going to be needed for that route. And I literally took all of this stuff on the chin. Like I was like, it is what it is, because now that I'm a year into not clocking in and working for myself, I'm so confident that even if this contract was to go away, that I would be able to go and land something else and still be able to generate income. Because now my whole mindset about wealth is totally different. Like I understand now when they say that wealth is a mindset, because it truly is. And once you get to that place where you start to see that you can do something, well, there's no turning back. Like this past week was the year celebration for me of when I walked away from my job. I literally had no exact plan, but I just had a burning desire and the utmost faith that betting on myself would work out. And as I continued to go down the path of believing and experiencing that everything was going to work itself out, naturally, that's what started to happen. Things started to work themselves out. Stuff started aligning that you couldn't even just make up. Thursday, I got a phone call that they needed me to run the morning route again, which, like I said, everything always works out. Because last week we dealt with snowpocalypse here in Huntsville, Alabama, and it was supposed to be, or it was, one of the coldest weeks that we've experienced this winter. So I was already kind of like dreading the fact that I was about to have to deal with that, right? But on top of all of those things, it got extremely icy. So I ended up not having to run at all last week. Avoided the crazy roads. And now we're back on that route. The weather is somewhat warmed back up. Still a little bit of ice patches here and there, but nothing to be alarmed of. And so we're back at it, man. And so this is why I say, like, you really have to just like remain middle grounded. Understand that as good as things are, they could, get just as bad. There's a balance that has to happen, a yin and a yang, equilibrium between the two. So once you understand that there's like a flow to how everything goes. What goes up must come down. And when you can prepare yourself for it, then when the things come down, like, it doesn't get me as out of pocket anymore. Because I understand if it's this bad, it could only become this much better. All right, man, so we're about to get ready to unload. It's 9:25, so we're gonna see how fast we can knock these out, The last stop of the day. And then we'll head back to get loaded for round 2. All right. There's a lot of people ask the question of, one, how did I get into doing what I do? And what does it consist of? And the interesting thing is when you start talking to people about it, they immediately say how they couldn't see themselves doing what I do. And honestly, this is not, to me, challenging work at all. When you have inspired action, it just makes it a lot easier to be able to do. You really don't stop and feel how challenging it truly may be. You just kind of like You're like, yo, the job has to get done. It has to get finished. So the more that I've found to put myself in these situations that are a lot more uncomfortable, it makes it easier to handle when tasks seem a little bit more challenging. So daily, I make it a point to do something that I really don't have to do, to go just a little bit harder than how I had to go. And what I learned is that by doing that, it helps me be prepared for when I am faced with the situation being a little bit more, difficult. We're gonna talk about that more in a second. You should daily try to put yourself in some extremely uncomfortable situations. Like every day, I try to figure out what's the hardest thing I can really do. What's something that's extremely uncomfortable for me to do? Or what's something that requires just a little bit more effort? Because I'm preparing myself for when life comes at me. When things start to really get uncomfortable, it becomes familiar territory. It's not something that I'm panicking about or any of those things, because I'm comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's just that simple.